Vivian, our protagonist, is an office worker who prefers solitude and often eats alone. Despite being criticized by her office manager for her introverted nature, she leads a double life as a successful novelist known for the Prince novel series. Her co-workers are unaware of her true identity, but Guyon, her landlord's daughter, knows the truth. Vivian is content with her co-workers enjoying her novels without knowing she's the author. However, when she overhears her manager eagerly awaiting her next book, her passion for writing intensifies. That night, a stranger resembling the prince from her novels breaks into her apartment, unwittingly entering her world. Upon arriving in the real world, Carl emerges from a sinkhole, confused about his whereabouts. Encountering Guyon reading Vivian's novel, Carl blames the author for his misfortunes and seeks her out. Confronting Vivian, he demands she rectify his story and crown him emperor. Vivian, perplexed by Carl's claims, tries to escape and calls the police. However, Carl forces her into the sinkhole. In Carl's world, Vivian awakens bound to a bed, distressed. Carl insists she write his story as he desires, providing her with parchment and a quill, though she struggles with the unfamiliar tools. Wait till she finds out how old-fashioned the rest of the things are there still. She writes that Prince Carl abducts the witch who writes the book from her apartment, but the witch manages to escape, and Prince Carl goes back in time to his younger self. He becomes the emperor one day and brings peace and prosperity to his nation. And everyone lives happily ever after. Vivian waits for her words to work their magic, and she panics when nothing happens. However, the letters materialize in a golden glow surrounding Carl's body, and Vivian is taken aback because she had no idea that she really has magical powers. Even before Vivian's words fully take effect, Carl is overjoyed. But then the agonizing pain spreads throughout his body, and he collapses to the floor. Afterwards, he gets up and scares Vivian by taking off his shirt and approaching her. She calls him a molester and tells him to stop, and then the prince shows his back, which is covered in the itchy writing. Ray quickly inspects the words written by Vivian, but he doesn't find anything unusual on the paper. He asks her to try again, but nothing happens. And later she writes to herself that she wants her hair cut short, and soon enough, her hair does just that. But nothing else happens, despite her written request that the chains be removed from her legs. Based on these two pieces of information, she deduces that the ink and parchment used in her work are figments of her imagination, created to ensure that her writing has no impact on her fictional characters. Thus, in order for her writing to impact the novel's characters, she requires her laptop. She needs to go back to reality and informs Carl and Ray about it the next day. Due to their fears that Vivian might run away, Carl and Ray don't trust her. They demand evidence that she is being truthful, and Vivian also shows off her short hairstyle, which she says is a direct outcome of her writing. However, Carl and Ray are flustered to see Vivian's big melons, which have grown to the point where her shirt buttons are nearly uncovered. Soon they sit down for breakfast and talk about Vivian's powers and how she wants to go back to the real world. To grant Carl's wish, Ray wants to go with Carl to the portal to the real world, and Carl doesn't want him to be in danger. So they argue. The portal between the real world and fiction is in the perilous northern woodland, and after a long discussion, Ray manages to convince Carl to let him come. There, they reach their final destination. Unfortunately, upon arriving, they fail to notice anything noteworthy that indicates the link between the two realms. Carl is distressed because he knows exactly where he was when he was nearly killed and lost an eye, and it was the same place where he got sent to the other world. Carl reveals to Vivian that he fell into a sinkhole after the ground split in half as he was about to die at the hands of assassins. As the attempt failed, Vivian remembered another location that connects the two realms. However, the horses they were riding suddenly bolted for no apparent reason. Just as she was about to reveal the location, Ray chases after the horses. They are interrupted by a sound coming from the forest. It appears that a band of robbers has just finished robbing a village. Even though Carl tells Vivian to take cover in a tree, she remains unconvinced. So he lifts her up and places her on his lap as he climbs the tree. As the bandits flee, Carl and Vivian feel relieved, but also shocked as they are about to descend from the tree. A strange creature that looks like a combination of a Komodo dragon and a panther emerges from the forest, catching them off guard. Vivian never wrote about any monsters in her stories, but she did write about the northern lands being cursed. She and Carl loudly dispute whether or not the monster is Vivian's creation, almost revealing their location to the monsters. Soon, it starts raining, and the monsters run away to avoid getting stuck in the swampy area. Vivian thinks that now is an excellent moment to climb down, but Carl tells her there is no way. Due to the extreme danger and the risk of submersion, he forbids her from stepping on the ground. Instead, he decides to spend the night on the treetop with Vivian, who is not the biggest fan of the idea. Here comes the first pseudo-intimate moment. As they plan to spend the night in the tree, Carl constructs a bed resembling a bird's nest out of branches. Vivian is shocked to see that, but she does not complain. As they lay down, Carl is irritated by Vivian's sounds because she is uncomfortable sleeping out in the open on a nest made of branches. After he warned her once, Vivian remains silent and even holds back a sneeze out of fear. However, Carl is currently thinking about how his kingdom is becoming prosperous because of Vivian's writing, and his two loser brothers are becoming heroes. Despite all that, he loses everything because of her. He wakes up contemplating the situation and notices that Vivian is feeling cold. He kindly offers her his robe to provide some warmth. After that, they go back to sleep, and the rain soon stops. Vivian wakes up and decides to climb higher up the tree because she wants to see the stars in the beautiful night sky. Vivian is astounded by the breathtaking sky view. As they ascend the tree, Carl asks about Vivian's real name, and then they discuss the fairies and kingdom at the top of the tree. Then, continuing with the theme of names, Carl asks about Vivian's last name. She tells him that she has none, and Carl tells her that in the fairies' kingdom, partners' last names are often used. He continues by saying that it is a wonder to meet a loved one. Vivian realizes that despite being a villain, the third prince is human after all. She feels bad that while the first two princes have spouses, the third prince has never kissed or held hands with a girl, and it's all her fault. Bro is more lonely than even me. Vivian thinks about it as she looks at her hand being held by Carl. She feels embarrassed, and then her imagination runs wild as Carl blames her for his barren love life. He asks her to take responsibility for it and starts to aggressively approach her. However, that is all RMC's imagination, as she is thirsty for love as well. She releases his hand as she is currently fearful that Carl might engage in inappropriate behavior towards her. He is just concerned that her face looks a little red, but she backs away from him, telling him not to think of him like that. She promises to ensure that when he becomes emperor, he has a harem of 100 queens and unlimited stamina. Carl becomes flustered upon hearing this and asks Vivian if she considers him to be a pervert. However, as she backs away, she falls down the tree due to an unsafe spot, and Carl jumps to save her, and they both fall into the sticky swamp. Carl tells Vivian that he will never stoop so low as to force himself on a girl, not even someone who barely looks like a girl with those short hair. He will have to eat those words one day. The next morning, they return to the Ray with their bodies shabby and dirty, so they go straight to the castle to clean themselves, while Vivian Soaks, a servant named Daisy, waits on her as per Ray's orders. Since Vivian feels uncomfortable being waited on like that, she starts talking with the maid. She also asks about Carl's mother, who doesn't live with Carl in this castle. Daisy informs her that she is summoned by the first prince to the capital, despite his strong dislike for Carl's mom, and she reciprocates the feeling. Vivian has never written that part because Carl's mom is just a minor character, and she wonders why things are happening when she doesn't intend them to. Later, Vivian goes to discuss with Carl and Ray the location of a spot connecting the two worlds. Vivian says that the tunnel is in the east, under the castle of the second Prince William, from which he came into this world. However, upon discovering the location of the tunnel, Carl and Ray hesitate to go there due to a previous altercation with the second prince. The fight happened because William thinks that his divorce was caused by Carl, even though it happened because William cheated on his wife. Vivian is surprised to hear that because she never wrote that William has an affair or a divorce. But Ray believes there is still another way to reach the tunnel. He explains that soon the festival called Urnfest is being held in the Horizon Kingdom, and this year it will be held in the Eastern Castle. So this is their chance to get to the tunnel. However, to make this happen, Carl needs to become a flower prince to enter the castle. Obviously, Carl declines because the flower prince's responsibility isn't just to escort the princess from the neighboring country, but also to join her in dancing, drinking tea, and engaging in other couple-like activities. It is basically like a limited, feature-free trial of a marriage. However, Carl has no choice but to do so, since it isn't easy to sneak into the Eastern Castle any other way. Ray prepares everything, including soldiers, to make their plan work. The soldiers he prepares are gardeners, cooks, and stable masters. However, as they are about to meet the soldiers, they are surprised by the presence of the creepy monsters from the northern forest. Carl takes it upon himself to vanquish all the monsters that dare to approach his castle. As it is in a state of severe panic, he bars everyone else from accompanying him. But Vivian cannot witness Carl fighting monsters by himself. She steals Ray's sword and leaps from the castle. Then she uses her powers and writes down her wish in her notebook to make it real. Although she was initially afraid of confronting the monsters, she quickly summons the courage to wield the sword and slashes at them until they cower in front of her. After dealing with the monsters, Vivian sets out to find Carl, who is struggling on his end. She wastes no time in attacking the demon standing before Carl, who is shocked to see her. Even after they kill every last creature, Carl is still furious with Vivian for disobeying his orders to remain in the castle, and the two get into a little quarrel. They sit down to talk, and Vivian tells Carl not to shoulder everything alone, or he will mess up one day. But while they were talking, Vivian falls asleep because she is exhausted from fighting the monsters, and Carl takes her to his chamber. Vivian sleeps until morning in Carl's room, and she wakes up dreaming that she has to go to work. However, upon waking up, she finds herself in a surprising location, and Carl instructs her to leave if she has sufficiently rested. He feels sleepy and tired, and also wants to sleep on the bed, so he takes off his clothes first before sleeping. Vivian screams as she sees Carl undressing, and he apologizes for his lack of manners before once again telling her to leave the room. A few days later, everyone in the castle is very busy preparing for the arrival of the delegation from the Middle Loren Kingdom. Ray has not slept for 2 days due to the preparations, and he wants to ask Vivian for a favor helping Carl learn to dance. Vivian is very hesitant to accept the request because she can't dance well, but Ray reminds Vivian to write in her notebook to have the ability to dance. She cannot refuse his intense request. However, she quickly realizes that it is a bad idea because Carl is completely untalented when it comes to dancing, and the last time he danced was when he was 10. Vivian is irritated because Carl keeps stepping on her feet, but after spending hours learning to dance, he finally understands how to do it. While Vivian dances to the music, she hears Carl's heartbeat and breaths. She thinks that they look like a real couple dancing like this, and while lost in thought, she trips and lands on Carl's chest. Daisy senses the growing chemistry between Carl and Vivian as she notices a change in the atmosphere at the palace. Ever since Vivian arrives, the castle is now bright and bustling, no longer resembling a haunted home, but instead exuding a vibrant energy. Also, it is adorable to see how Vivian and Carl interact as she makes him more expressive than before. One night, while Vivian and Carl are practicing their sword skills, they become exhausted and decide to take a rest there. Carl offers her his arm as a pillow while they gaze at the sky, and she feels flustered. He talks about all the humiliation and losses Vivian makes him go through, but he is glad that at least she doesn't kill him, even though she hates him. He thanks her for keeping him alive, and Daisy, who is watching them, is now confident that this is a cannon ship. At night, as Vivian is about to fall asleep, she feels sad that she will soon have to leave this world. However, the gloomy atmosphere is shattered by an earthquake, and within a minute, Carl comes to Vivian's room and takes her away from the castle. He claims that the earthquake is the same as the one that took place when he got sent to the real world, and he wants to send Vivian back now. However, as they reach the location of the earthquake, they find that the ground has not split. Carl feels very desperate and furious, while Vivian senses that he wants to send her back to her world. She thinks that she is only a tool for Carl to fulfill his desire to become emperor. Vivian suggests that Carl looks for the hole with the assistance of others. Carl found it nonsensical since ordering the people in the castle to search for a hole was impossible. While they were all occupied with preparations for the delegation, he doesn't understand what Vivian means, and he becomes furious with her because he thinks she wants to return to the real world so badly. While she thinks the same about him, the misunderstanding between the two increases until their voices wake up. The monsters in the forest. The monsters surround them, and they have no choice but to face all the monsters. Unfortunately, Vivian forgot to bring the sword because she was in a hurry, and things get complicated as their horse is also killed. Carl starts attacking all the monsters who seem to be acting to separate him from Vivian. Strangely, the monsters don't attack her, and one of them tries to request her favor. The monsters surround her, and Carl can't stand it, so he rushes to her help, but he gets injured and overwhelmed by the monsters. Vivian is covered by monsters, and he panics upon seeing that. However, they do not harm her and only nudge her away from Carl, who is trying his best to free her. Vivian witnesses Carl being ambushed by a monster as he tries to reach her, and she runs to save him and gets injured instead. Carl is furious as he sees this and wishes he could end the lives of every monster in the area. But then suddenly, the monsters silently leave. Carl worries about Vivian, but she feels that despite wishing for strength, she remains a burden to him. She is crying as she promises to never get away from him, and he somehow carries her back to the castle. Ray is shocked and angry that Carl hurt his arm, and he is mad at Vivian for letting him get injured. When the Middle Lauren delegation is about to arrive, soon, however, Carl scolds him too, because Vivian is hurt worse than him. When the Middle Lauren group arrives at the castle the next morning, Ray has already styled Carl's clothes in a way that hides his wounds. After that, Carl asks Vivian about how he looks, and she really wants to tell Carl how handsome he looks in that outfit, but all she can say is that he looks fine. Following that, the Middle Lauren group arrives, and everyone in the castle rushes to the courtyard. Vivian is smitten seeing Princess Sylvia, who looks more beautiful than she imagined, and she feels like they are a perfect match for Carl. The princess is also interested in Carl, and she comments that she never thought her flower knight is so dashing, but Carl is no simp and doesn't give her any attention. Oscar, the first prince, appears to have been aware of Middle Lauren's group's impending arrival as he dispatched a spy to Carl's castle. He is certain that Carl's reasons for becoming a flower prince are not just to find a life partner, and he wants to know more about his plans. However, he does not actively interfere in anything, and the party goes on as planned. Carl and Sylvia have tea in the rose garden behind the castle. Sylvia says that she imagined herself drinking tea with Carl in this setting ever since he wrote about the garden in her letter. However, Ray writes the letter instead of Carl. They continue to talk until Sylvia finally announces that she is the fortunate bride of the third prince. Carl and Vivian are shocked by what they hear. Sylvia feels so embarrassed about getting carried away in her feelings that she runs and falls face first to the floor. When Sylvia trips and falls, Carl initially doesn't care, but Ray insists that he goes after her because he is the flower knight at the moment. Carl goes after the princess and eventually wins her over, though in a grumpy way. Vivian goes to her room to feel better, but as she lies down, her mind is filled with memories of her time with Carl. She wonders why she is so upset when Carl is finally getting something good in his life. Carl walks into her room unexpectedly while she is deep in thought, startling her. She promises to be a good soldier and not disappoint him, but Carl plays with her hair and puts a red ribbon around her neck, telling her not to lose it as it signifies that she is one of his knights. With that, he leaves her room, leaving Vivian even more confused. On the following day, Carl and Princess Sylvia go for a walk around the castle. She praises Carl a lot as they walk together when all of a sudden, a castle pillar breaks and almost hits Sylvia. Carl steps in to protect her, but this is enough to scare her, and she asks to go back to her room. When Sylvia walks into her room, her true personality emerges. Her servants claim that Carl seems like a nice person for her, but she brutally attacked a maid. Sylvia is so mad that she has no choice but to meet the prince with only one eye in his old and broken-down castle. Her assistant manages to calm her down by reminding her that if she loses her temper, it will be bad for her revenge plan to get back at her half-sister, Lady Froch. Sylvia and Carl both have their own plans for this meeting, with her displaying a more sinister and villainous nature compared to him. Sylvia swears to marry Carl and make him the emperor for her revenge, no matter what. Carl and Sylvia go to William's castle as soon as the sun comes up. Sylvia tries to start a conversation with Carl several times during the trip, but he mostly keeps quiet because he isn't interested in her. The princess is furious that he is ignoring her, but she tries her best to come up with excuses to talk to him. They continue their journey, and soon Vivian notices that there are monsters following them. She tells Ray to go with Carl while she goes out by herself to get rid of the monsters. However, Carl notices something odd, and when he learns the truth, he is very angry with Ray for letting Vivian go on her own. He chooses a knight to ride in his chariot instead of himself so that they can continue their journey to William's castle while he leaves to save Vivian. Sylvia is not happy about that, and she can barely keep acting like a decent person. Meanwhile, Vivian does everything she can to fight the monsters, but it doesn't work. The monsters seem to hear her when she tries to talk to them softly, but while she talks to the monsters, a green spear flies by her and hits a nearby tree. She is shocked and amazed when she sees that the person who saves her is none other than William, the second prince. When William left his castle, he planned to meet Carl in the forest, but instead, he meets Vivian. He can't help but smile as he carries Vivian to safety. After seeing how badly her leg is hurt, she finds it unacceptable that he is treating her this way, but it doesn't bother him at all. Carl shows up to them immediately and tells William to lay Vivian down. He doesn't follow his half-brother's orders, and Carl gets angry and pulls out a sword. William lets Vivian down, but then he and Carl get into a fight that brings up old grudges. They pull out their swords, but fortunately, the Knight Commander steps in just then and orders them to stop the fight. The general works for the first prince and commands the princes to return to their positions. After that, Carl and Vivian leave the place, and he asks her what she thinks about William. Even though she intends to be honest with him, she chooses to praise William instead. However, she also clearly expresses her dislike for the second prince due to his infidelity to his wife. Carl feels happy and calm after seeing it, and then he puts his head on Vivian's shoulder and plans to meet Middle Lauren's group after a short nap. She is embarrassed because of it, but she has no choice as Carl is already asleep, and after a lengthy journey, they finally reach William's palace, accompanied by Lauren's group. Despite the friendly demeanor of the people there, it's evident they harbor animosity towards Carl. Princess Sylvia's disdain for him is also apparent. William surprises Carl's group by barring their entry into the castle, instead assigning Vivian and Ray to the unkempt barracks. This unexpected treatment shocks Carl, especially considering their supposed status as castle guests. William justifies his actions by singling out Vivian for her previous humiliation of him, branding her as a low-level soldier unfit for the castle's accommodations. Carl is outraged by William's behavior, but Vivian manages to soothe him. He worries about her well-being, disliking the idea of her being treated as a low-ranking soldier. William's suspicions about Vivian's origins lead him to investigate her past, convinced she hails from Earth like him. Vivian, exhausted from her tasks, feels particularly drained by evening, exacerbated by her inability to eat properly among the other soldiers. Thankfully, Ray visits her, bringing dinner and inquiring about her plans to return to the real world. Vivian, caught off guard, questions Ray's desire for her presence, to which he expresses the Northern Castle's wish for her to stay. She insists on returning to fulfill Carl's dream of becoming emperor. Ray suggests that if Carl marries Princess Sylvia, Vivian may not need to return to the real world, as Sylvia could facilitate Carl's ascension to the throne. Distressed by this notion, Vivian flees. Meanwhile, Sylvia's servant attempts to dissuade her from pursuing Carl due to his flaws, but Sylvia remains resolute, seeking vengeance against her half-sister Froch by marrying Carl. During dinner with Carl, Sylvia tries to negotiate their marriage, citing the strategic advantages it would bring, including access to the Lauren Kingdom's secret weapon, the crossbow. She even tries to seduce Carl, but he rebuffs her advances, adamant that he will only marry for love. Enraged by his rejection, Sylvia loses control. Meanwhile, Vivian, fleeing from Ray, encounters a small monster in the forest, unable to harm it due to its cuteness. Daisy silently observes her contemplation of returning to Earth. She approaches Vivian and asks her what she means by going to the other world. Vivian is struggling to convey her current situation to Daisy, but she eventually manages to say that she needs to return home since her family is worried about her. Daisy opposes her return because she knows Vivian has feelings for Carl, and she cannot see the prince marrying Sylvia. However, Vivian feels that she needs to go back home and turn things right for Carl, even though she admits that she likes him. She feels embarrassed after saying that and runs away, unaware that Carl is hiding nearby, and he overheard the girls talk about him amidst the bustle of the event preparations. The following day, Carl, Ray, and Vivian venture to the underground area in search of the portal leading to Earth. Since Carl rejected Sylvia's marriage proposal, they have to continue with this strategy. Upon their covert entrance into the underground room, they make a startling revelation. There exists no door that leads to a tunnel. Only a wall is within sight. Infuriated, Carl slams his fist against the wall, and suddenly the wall starts shaking and making a weird noise. It appears that the dead-end wall is a trapdoor that leads to the tunnel. Carl and his team hastily enter the tunnel, but the presence of numerous soldiers stationed in the basement puts a stop to their plans. They are taken aback that William deployed so many troops to the basement, and they decide to make their way back to the castle's main hall, where the banquet is about to start. Daisy waits impatiently for Carl and the others to arrive in the banquet hall near the entrance to the dungeon. When they return to the room, her worries vanish. The party starts, and Vivian finds that Ray is a proper noble and has a good reputation. But as soon as Carl enters, people start talking about him. Soon, a female knight named Minerva comes to the party and greets Ray and Carl. She is the divorced wife of Prince Win and the female lead of Vivian's second novel. Needless to say, she is her girl crush, and Vivian tells Minerva that it is a great honor to meet her. Minerva appears to dislike her, and she immediately slaps her, causing the entire banquet hall to fall silent. She asks Vivian where her manners are as a knight because this is not how she is supposed to greet her. Commander Carl rushes to Vivian's rescue and fights with Minerva about how she is treating her. Meanwhile, William is unaware that Minerva has come to his castle because Princess Sylvia is in his office offering him the design for the crossbow owned by Middelloren in exchange for his help. William tells her that he will think about it, but as he leaves his office, a servant informs him that Minerva is in his castle and is fighting with Vivian. Vivian and Minerva are fighting to their heart's content, and soon William reaches the courtyard to enjoy the show as well. After the fierce fight, Vivian is brought into the castle for treatment. Initially, everyone lacked awareness of the wound on Vivian's hand. However, Carl knows very well that Vivian's hand must be injured. After blocking several sword strikes from Minerva, he takes her hand to look at the wounds and tries to treat them. Fortunately, Daisy understands the situation, and she quickly makes an excuse that she will look for medicine outside with Ray. Carl is pleased with Daisy's prompt understanding of his wishes, and he plans to give her a bonus. She deserves a raise for being the best wingman. Carl and Vivian are left alone in the room, and he continues to treat her hand. Vivian is taken aback because she wasn't expecting Carl to be this concerned about her. He places his hand on her cheek, his curiosity piqued by her rising temperature. Vivian turns red like a tomato because of how close they are. Carl moves towards her for a kiss, and their lips almost touch. But then Ray returns to spoil the mood. "Get a life, dude!" Carl stretches while Vivian clutches the medicine box, trying to hide what is going on. Both of them are anxious that Ray and Daisy caught them off guard, but she assures him that everything is fine now. After that, the four of them continue their objective and head to the underground area. Vivian has a bright idea and brings along her notebook and pen. She writes down her desire in the book and becomes Ant-Man to sneak into the tunnel. Everyone promptly gets down to action. However, William's maid, Erden, suspects Daisy because she noticed Daisy entering the room with Carl and leaving alone. Meanwhile, Vivian manages to enter the room. She sprints from one room to another, but soon realizes her small size makes her take a long time to cross a room. She collapses onto the floor, exhausted from running, and then suddenly a rat comes up to her. She is afraid of rats and runs, but the rat chases her until she can no longer run away from it. She wishes that someone comes to her aid, and as plot armor may have it, her wish comes true. Out of nowhere, the monster she recently encountered appears and squashes the mouse. The mouse runs away, leaving Vivian behind. She is very happy when the little monster comes to save her life, and she also asks it for a ride to take her up the stairs. Once upstairs, she leaves the little monster for a while to get into another room. Vivian discovers a massive iron door in the room, complete with a number lock mirroring the real world. She forgot that William is from the real world, so he could have created that to stop anyone from going back there. Now she returns to see Carl with the assistance of the little monster. Meeting Carl and Ray causes her body to grow once more. Upon her return, she briefs them about her observations, and they hurry back to the main hall. However, as they open the door, William and his army are on guard. They also notice Daisy, who is bound with a rope. William arrests all 4 of them and carries them out where he ties them. Carl demands to be released, but William simply ignores him and rudely asks Vivian if she is from the real world. Be nice to your author, dude. You will be killed in the next novel otherwise. After that, he tries to intimidate and question Vivian, and he goes on to claim that Vivian is actually a witch from Carl Castle. She knows she can't escape this situation by lying, so she fearlessly confesses to being a witch. She is well aware of William's fear of monsters and ghosts. Furthermore, she reveals that she knows William's real name from the other world. William is astonished to discover that Vivian knows his real name. He becomes so angry that he threatens to kill her so she doesn't reveal his secret. Vivian doesn't have much choice, so she screams. But little does she know how it will turn out. A peculiar noise stops William's knife from hitting Vivian, and soon her savior, the little monster, makes its appearance. He is not alone, and he has brought a number of adult monsters with him to save Vivian. The monsters come down and stand behind Vivian. William attempts to flee from the monsters that are encircling him. However, he is now completely powerless, and even after his knights arrive to aid him, nothing changes. Meanwhile, Carl and Ray are filled with fear as they witness Vivian's proximity to the monsters. Afraid that the monsters will also attack her, they quickly learn that the monster is actually here to save Vivian. Then Vivian orders the monsters to play around with William because he keeps threatening her despite being scared himself. The monsters do as she orders, and the poor prince gets scared and shouts that he just wants to live happily in this world. Vivian is about to enter the castle when the little monster runs to her feet, wanting to come with her. Unfortunately, more soldiers are coming there, and Vivian tells him and the other monsters to go back for now, even though the cute baby monster is crying. After that, they reach inside the castle and discuss what is happening with the monsters. William becomes anxious when he learns that Vivian has the ability to control the monsters. He worries that they may have known his secret all along and shared it with her. He also wants to know if she sent him a letter, but she doesn't know what he's talking about, so the prince aborts that conversation. After that, Vivian makes it clear that she intends to go back to the real world, but for that she needs to know the code to the tunnel under the castle. William is also curious about Vivian's desire to return to real life, but she is reluctant to disclose the reason. He tries to tempt her with rewards to stay here, but she refuses to listen to him. However, William is very stubborn, so Carl makes a bet with him. He challenges his half-brother to a horse race on the final day of Urnfist. If he loses, he promises that he and Vivian, as well as the monsters, will not disturb the castle in the east. But if he wins, William has to comply with his wishes. Vivian is surprised to hear Carl's statement because she fears Carl will lose the race, but he is confident this time. The following day, the Urnfist ball dance takes place, and Vivian feels that the noble girls look beautiful and graceful in dresses. Ray pities her for not wearing a dress, despite Vivian being perfectly content with her current attire of knightly clothes. After the two of them chat for a while, Vivian says goodbye to Ray and goes to the barracks. She hears everyone talking about Carl's defeat in the horse race there and feels guilty for that. She ignores Carl when he comes to see her. On the other hand, after Vivian departs, Ray is immediately greeted by Carl's mother, Lady Brenda. He was unaware that Lady Brenda is present at the castle today, despite being expected to be at the Capitol. He freaks out upon seeing her, but as he turns around to look for Carl, he is surprised to see Carl's sister Lily waiting for him. The two continue talking until Carl arrives, and he is taken aback when he sees Lily at the castle. After that, they have tea together, but he worries his mother might meet Princess Sylvia. His fears have already come true as his mom meets Sylvia on her way to see William, and they decide to catch up later. After her meeting with Carl and Ray, Lily feels disheartened. She currently has a massive crush on Ray, and Carl is aware of it, but he informed his sister that he wouldn't assist her with that, although he wouldn't object either. He fears that suggesting anything about Lily to Ray will come across as an order, so he wants to stay clear of it. Lily keeps sighing about her condition and meets her match in Vivian, who is doing the same. Vivian immediately recognizes her from her hair and then introduces herself as Carl's personal bodyguard. Lily is very happy when she finds out about her and asks her about the North and her brother, who is always cold to her. She also wants to take Vivian's help to tell Ray about her crush. After her stroll with Daisy, she returns to the castle and can't stop thinking about it. Soon, she hears someone knocking on the door and finds that it is Carl. She avoids him again, but Carl wants to give Vivian something, so he holds the door open. He can't find the words to tell her what he wants. When he hands Vivian a box with a red dress inside, he tells her to wear it to the ball tonight and races away from her. Unable to control his nervousness, Vivian returns to her room to look at the dress that Carl gave her when she hears another knock on the door. This time, it is Ray who has brought a blue dress for her for tonight's event. Now, Vivian is more confused than ever about which dress to choose. Vivian can't make up her mind between the red and blue dresses, and soon Daisy comes to her room to assist her in putting on a dress. She is taken aback because she is unable to comprehend why the girl has been offered two dresses. She reasons that Carl could have asked Ray for assistance, who went out and purchased an additional dress. Then, Lily enters Vivian's room because she wants to ask Daisy for help dressing her. She feels so self-conscious about attending the ball alone that she invites Vivian to accompany her. Meanwhile, Carl meets with his mother, who is determined to marry him off to Sylvia in order to make him the next emperor. He enters the ball and attracts all the spotlight because of his stunning formal attire. After Carl, Lily shows up, and she can't take her gaze off of Ray. Susie and Vivian also come there wearing the red dress Carl gave her. Ray is devastated, but Carl is very happy. That's the obvious result. But I feel sorry for Ray. Soon after that, Vivian tells Ray that Carl gifted her a dress before him, so she decided to wear it. He acts cool, but Lily hears it too, and she is not happy about it. Soon, a group of men gather around Vivian, introduce themselves, and start to flirt with her. She is taken aback, but thankfully Carl rescues her and tells everyone to get lost. Carl compliments her dress and teases her about how beautiful it looks on her. Vivian's cheeks flush red, and Lily and Minerva are shocked to see their budding romance, and all they need now is popcorn. However, Ray suppresses his disappointment and clenches his fists. Shortly after that, Princess Sylvia arrives in the ballroom with William as her flower knight. Everyone is taken aback by that sight. Carl's mom is so enraged by this that she summons her son to have a chat, and he leaves with her. As the celebrations begin, William and Princess Sylvia were making their rounds at the ball, and he is astonished to see Minerva there. William confirmed with his maid Erden that Minerva won't be at the ball in advance, but she twisted her words and lied to him. William abandons Princess Sylvia and goes after Minerva to give explanations for his actions, but she is extremely disappointed in him and finds no value in any justifications he offers. Carl, who comes out of the room where he and his mother are conversing earlier, catches a glimpse of the argument between William and Minerva. He turns his attention from them to his sister, who leaves the room with a sorrowful expression. Sylvia was furious at the two brothers and she cursed them. She also remembered the chat she had with William while they negotiated the deal about crossbows. She believed that she could win William over because of his divorce, but she was mistaken because despite the divorce, William admits that Minerva is still the only one for him. While they keep dancing, Vivian and Ray move closer to where Princess Sylvia is sitting and gradually catch wind of what she is saying. Once they notice her departure, they promptly plot their next move. However, Carl shows up just then and wants to know where they are headed. Even though he sees that Ray and Vivian are dancing, he still wants to know what they are doing. However, his questions only cause Ray to hold Vivian's hand tighter. Carl tells him to release her hand, and he obeys his command. After some time after that, Carl pulls Vivian outside the palace by grabbing her hand. While she complains that it hurts, Carl hurries to the palace garden while still holding her hand. He releases it when she insists and then tells her that seeing her dance with Ray made him envious, especially because it's her first at a formal event. She offers Carl a dance as her way of calming him down. He turns red with embarrassment and takes her hand timidly, and the two of them begin to dance. While dancing, they grow closer as they enjoy themselves. Carl then explains the significance of the first dance to Vivian. He gently kisses her lips to convey that a first dance is something like a first kiss. Vivian is not okay for the rest of the night and is unsure of how to act when they will meet again. Suddenly, the sound of a knock on the door sends her into a state of heightened terror. As she opens the door, Carl is standing there. She is startled and feels anxious, feeling uneasy in his presence. He is there to invite her to the Urnfest night, where the festival truly comes alive. During the Urnfest festival, they have fun, and after enjoying themselves, they proceed to the maze. Carl invites Vivian to the maze on purpose so he can show her something. Then Carl does something special for Vivian. He stomps his foot and the maze fireflies awaken and begin to glow around them. As fireflies light up the maze, it transforms from a terrifying haunted house into a stunningly beautiful maze. Much to her astonishment, they speak for a long time while they are in the maze. Vivian eventually expresses her worry about Carl's participation in the horse riding race. She feels bad for writing the story in such a way that it prevents Carl from getting even with William. Listening to her statements makes Carl very angry, as he feels that Vivian sees him as a pathetic person who only wants revenge against William. He promises to try his best to return her home because Vivian is more precious to him than mere imperial status. Carl leaves her to search for the manager to guide them out of the maze, and Vivian is overcome with emotion as he departs. She did not anticipate Carl's genuine feelings for her. She fears for his safety in the following race and is already overwhelmed with regret over her misunderstanding of him. She lets out a scream and confesses that she, too, likes Carl. As she finishes speaking, Carl comes before her again. She felt embarrassed because Carl overheard her, but he felt overjoyed because he now understands Vivian's feelings. He wastes no time kissing Vivian passionately and embracing her closely until his feelings get through to her. Vivian hugs him, and Carl feels more assured that he will prevail over William. After spending the night with her, he is confident that he will win, since no god is trying to make him lose this time. The racers take their positions, and at the host signal, the race starts. Everyone speeds off to the forest and the hills. Vivian is very anxious that something will happen to Carl, so she constantly monitors his movements through the binoculars that Daisy provided her. Carl and William are in the lead, but as soon as the group reaches the hilly region, her binocular vision diminishes. Fortunately, she has her book and pen on hand, so she writes her wish and gets a superpower to see through the trees. She goes back to watching Carl, and then she notices that as everyone starts to make their way along the cliff edge, someone is preparing to throw rocks from the cliff top. Furiously, though, the rocks are tossed to the ground right as Carl is about to go over the precipice. Fortunately, he manages to evade the falling stones and keeps running after William. But after witnessing this, Vivian cannot stay silent. She gets up from her seat and approaches the referee. While Sylvia thinks that the girl has sharp instincts, Vivian tells him that the match has to end due to the dangers involved. However, the referee is unable to halt the match and believes the stadium to be safe due to the presence of all the soldiers stationed there to ensure the competitors' safety. After failing to convince the referee, Vivian decides to go to the forest on her own to safeguard Carl. Ray stops her from entering the forest because they are both unaware of the dangers that might be there. However, she disregards his warning and proceeds to write in her book about her desire to run faster than anyone. After running for some time, Vivian eventually catches up to the contestants, but to avoid exposing herself, she keeps her distance from Carl. The assassins try to harm Carl multiple times, but he dodges all of them. However, they trap him in a swamp and are about to shoot him with arrows when Vivian comes there and takes them down. She writes in her book to master swordplay, and thus she easily defeats the assassins. However, the commander of assassins is not done yet, and he escapes and calls for backup. Even as she deals with them, she keeps an eye on Carl, using her supervision. Knowing that the match is almost over brings a sense of relief to her, as it signifies her success in preventing the troops from interfering with Carl. However, the commander of the assassins gives the signal for the rest of the soldiers to get ready for the assault on William and Carl. Vivian is shocked and decides to deal with the assassins first. She launches an assault on the unit leader without realizing that some masked soldiers are also pursuing her from atop the tree. One of them attempts to harm Vivian by shooting her with a crossbow, but Ray, who arrives on horseback just then, saves her by sacrificing himself. The masked soldiers eventually come down and surround Vivian. Vivian fears the commander because she knows he is quite powerful, causing her to lose focus, and the masked assassins mercilessly slash at her body. Meanwhile, Carl and William lead the race, with William still in the first position. As they both come out of the last obstacle safely, Sylvia is shocked that all her assassins have failed despite William appearing to be the clear winner. When they emerge from the thorny roots, Carl is determined to win the contest. Carl sees a parallel to his first race with William as he crosses the bridge. He directs his horse to leap over the rocks next to the bridge and wins the race. His victory catches everyone off guard, leaving them speechless. Meanwhile, William feels upset about losing, and even Minerva is heartbroken to see that, while everyone cheers on Carl, he continues to search for Vivian but can't find her. Daisy approaches him suddenly, her eyes filled with tears, and informs him that Vivian has gone to the forest with Ray in an attempt to cancel the match. In the forest, Ray and Vivian are both unconscious as the masked assassins have left them for dead.
Love the Manhwa? Subscribe for more. Your support makes it all possible. Hit subscribe now!
Ray wakes up after some time and is horrified to discover Vivian covered in blood. He quickly makes notes in Vivian's book to help her recover from the wounds. Obviously, this will never happen because his writing renders it useless. He finds himself attempting to guide Vivian's hand to write, but it also proves to be unsuccessful. To swiftly seek assistance, he gets to his feet and gently carries Vivian's body towards the castle. At the castle, Carl, stunned by the news about Vivian and Ray, immediately heads to the woods to search for them. Princess Sylvia steps up to congratulate him, but he wants to rush to the woods, so he disregards her words. However, an arrow flies past him, startling him. He turns to Sylvia, realizing her treachery. He sees a group of Middle Lauren knights encircling him with crossbows in their hands, and they tie him once he cannot put up a fight. Meanwhile, William's knights are doing their best to defend their master from Middle Lauren assassins. William realizes that his side is at a disadvantage, so he joins the battle and shows off his spear skills. However, he has to abandon his plan when he notices that Princess Sylvia has taken Erden prisoner. Sylvia expresses her contempt for the princes of Farison as she stomps on Carl's head and makes fun of his missing eye. She declares that she wanted to kill both the princes in the race, but they are tougher than she thought. After taking both princes as prisoners, she slaps them in front of the crowd to vent her frustration. William attempts to talk with Princess Sylvia and offers her a deal to avoid war despite her actions, but he is hit again. Unbeknownst to her, Minerva witnessed Sylvia's harsh treatment of the two fairies and princes. The crazy princess tries to convince her to abandon her cheating ex-husband, but Minerva is not going to forgive anyone who harms her man. She charges towards Sylvia and the Middle Lauren. Soldiers try their best to stop her, but fail. One of the knights threatens to kill William to keep Minerva at bay, but it proves to be fruitless as Erden frees herself and takes care of the soldier, attempting to harm her prince. Following this, Erden frees William from the rope, while Minerva frees Carl. Together, the three of them put an end to the chaos caused by Princess Sylvia and her entourage of knights, and then they all get caught and bound. After everything calms down, William approaches Minerva to express his gratitude and tries to talk about the incident that led to their divorce. She tells them to tidy up before they speak, since she is really looking forward to hearing it in detail. William is overjoyed, and at the same time, Carl frees Daisy, and then decides to find Vivian and Ray. He doesn't need to do anything as Vivian and Ray manage to make it to the castle despite their injuries. Upon witnessing their condition, Carl is taken aback and promptly has them transported to the castle for medical attention. Vivian wakes up the following morning feeling completely fine and without any physical injuries. Ray is still unconscious when she rolls out of bed. Shortly after she regains consciousness, the doctor visits her along with Daisy and tells her that Ray's life is not in danger since his critical organs are unharmed. Since Vivian hasn't seen Carl since waking up, she asks Daisy where he is. Daisy informs her that Carl spent the night watching out for her, but has some urgent trial matters to attend to. This morning, at another location, William argues with the Royal Guard commander about Princess Sylvia's trial, which he refuses to acknowledge because the Royal Guard is conducting it. Since the incident occurred on his land, he insists that the trial is held there as well. Even Minerva disagrees with the decision, but Carl does nothing more than watch while they argue. Just as things get heated, Vivian pops in. She embraces and kisses Carl without hesitation in front of everyone. Minerva is not caught off guard, as she suspected all along that Carl and Vivian have some connection. William is shocked, and furthermore, the butler Bruce appears to be aghast. William comes to congratulate Carl on his victory in the race. When he and Vivian have completed catching up, he also fulfills his commitment to let Vivian pass through the tunnel door. Later, they discuss their future plans, and Carl informs Vivian what he wanted to tell her when he won the race. He wants her to stay with him, even if it means that she can never change his ending and he has to live like a villain for the rest of his life. He expresses his desire to remain by her side and his distaste for her returning to the real world. Then he gets down on one knee and asks Vivian if she will marry him. She accepts Carl's proposal by immediately embracing him, showing that his words touch her deeply. Later, they announce their intention to get married with everyone present in William's castle. Everyone is filled with joy by the good news, and they celebrate well into the night, except for Ray, obviously. The next morning, Vivian finds herself in Carl's room, right next to her future husband. Last night, she got too drunk and doesn't remember anything beyond pulling Carl into his room, despite his resistance. Now that the unrest event is over, Carl and his company are returning to his castle. Minerva also prepares for some knights to be stationed in the northern castle, as she wants to assist her friends. They return to the north, savoring the journey. But then, out of nowhere, they hear a scream. It turns out that it was coming from an imperial messenger who was being robbed by bandits. Even though Carl and Vivian are unaware of the man's identity, they attempt to help him. But even before they can do that, the bandits flee for their lives, leaving the knight bewildered. The reason becomes clear as a group of monsters walks towards them. Vivian hurries up to the monsters to comfort them, while Carl advises his knights to remain composed, as the monsters pose no threat if left undisturbed. The monsters seem to want to take Vivian somewhere when they meet her. The little monster then appears right in front of Vivian, telling her to follow him, but not allowing Carl to come along. The monster gang leads Vivian to their destination at a slow pace initially, but eventually they have her ride on their back and ride as fast as a horse. Carl desperately pursues her alone, and as Doris frees the messenger, he tells them that the prince immediately needs to go to the capital since the emperor has been killed. Meanwhile, the monsters lead Vivian deep into the forest, and they eventually come to a huge tree. Vivian realizes that this is the world tree, but it is covered with something dark and greasy. Suddenly, the little monster goes inside the tree, and after a deafening buzzing sound, a gigantic talking monster pops out of the tree and starts talking with Vivian. It explains that all the monsters were actually spirits that ensured that everything in this world happens. According to Vivian's writing, the world tree sent them to talk to the author, but they failed each time until it sends a baby monster. The gigantic monster then tells her that this world is in a crisis because one character who gained awareness that it is a character in a book and is now trying to destroy this world. He is the butler, Bruce, who serves the first prince. This happened because Vivian neglected the character background. In the first and second novels, Bruce's age, appearance, and even his personality underwent significant changes from the first novel to the second, resulting in his newfound self-awareness. Bruce burnt the World Tree after becoming aware of his fate. That made the World Tree weak and corrupted the spirits, and they were about to vanish forever. As a result, the World Tree dispatched Carl to Earth to meet the author so that she can solve the problem. But instead, he brought her into the novel. After she arrived, the power of the spirits weakened even further due to her magic notebook, and now it is reaching its end. Ray put a lot of effort into healing her, so the book is almost spent, and it has only one usable page left in it. The giant monster finishes their chat by telling Vivian to get back to Earth, using the first prince's pathway as soon as possible to save this world. If she doesn't do that, everything in this world, including her, will disappear. All the spirits disappear except for the little monster who guides Vivian forward. Meanwhile, Carl arrives to pick up Vivian, who is torn because of what she just heard. After that, they go back to the castle together. But as they meet with their group, they learn the unbelievable news that Carl's mother, Madame Brenda, murdered the Emperor. The news shocks them since, from what they understand, Madame Brenda showed the Emperor nothing but love and care. Carl and Vivian can't believe that she killed him, even though she was caught red-handed. They reason that someone who despises the royal family is trying to frame her. The messenger tells Carl to wait for the royal guards who will escort him to the palace. But Ray has suspicions about it and dismisses the messenger. Ray insists that they go to the capital. He believes this is the perfect moment to acquire power and solidify Carl's right to the throne, while he offers to secretly enter the prison with Vivian to save Madame Brenda. Apparently, Bruce and the commander of the royal guards are plotting something behind the scenes as well. They think Carl will surely come to save his mom, and they are ready to deal with him. However, the commander doesn't completely trust Bruce ever since he found out about his involvement in the actions of Princess Sylvia. Meanwhile, Carl and his group make their way to the Imperial Palace. Vivian continues to think about the only remaining passage to the real world. She is sure that it is in the library where Oscar first came to this world and met his love, Urea. She is not certain about which library it is, so she asks Ray about it, and he thinks it could be the Grand Library in the palace. In the palace, the commander of the Royal Guard prepares to stop Carl from saving his mother and seals every entrance to the prison. They are unaware, though, that Carl and Ray have already parted ways in order to implement their scheme. They also have no idea that Ray has discovered a way to enter through the sewer. Ray, Vivian, and the baby monster set out on their adventure. Inside the sewer, Vivian shrinks herself, using her book to open the locked door from the other side. However, she has only one usable page, so she writes as small as she can. As she shrinks, she and the baby monster squeeze into a room through a small hole. Vivian rides on the baby monster's back for some extra speed. Fortunately, they arrive at their destination and reach a room where Vivian returns to her original size and opens the door. She is shocked when she sees a soldier there, but it is just Ray. He gives her a spare armor set to blend into, and then they go inside. Meanwhile, Carl storms into the conference room where Oscar and the other nobles hold a discussion about what to do next, planning the coronation of the new emperor, preparing for the emperor's death, or prosecuting Madame Brenda. However, a decision was not made when Carl arrived, and Oscar decides to postpone the useless meeting because he wants to have a private conversation with his half-brother. Carl becomes enraged as his mother is falsely accused of killing his father. He swiftly places his blade around Oscar's neck, not waiting for him to speak. His mother's devotion to the emperor is all he knows. Therefore, he knows she would never do anything like that. Oscar, who knows Madame Brenda's actual character better than anybody else, laughs at Carl's remarks. He says that she doesn't love the Emperor and asks Carl to consider the reasons she has for killing the Emperor. He claims that he gave Madame Brenda an opportunity to repent, but she remained unconvinced. Oscar is now telling Carl that he will spare his mom's life and allows him to become the Emperor, as his only desire is for Urea to recover, and for that, he requires the assistance of the author of their story, Vivian. Meanwhile, Vivian and Ray head to the prison room where Madame Brenda is supposedly held, but the security is too lax. However, the moment Vivian enters the room, Ray locks her inside and she finds a sword pointed at her with Bruce holding it. Vivian is pinned against the door, and she realizes that Ray has betrayed her and made a deal with Bruce. She asks him why he did that, and Bruce decides to tell her that the reason for all of Carl's misfortunes is her mother. It all started when Carl failed a diplomatic mission and a powerful noble named Duke Lily solved the problem. The Emperor feared the Duke's influence, and what's more, he was paranoid that the Duke is attempting to seize control of the royal family by arranging a marriage between his daughter Uriah and Oscar. He wanted to do something about them, and Madame Brenda gave him an idea to frame the innocent Uriah for trying to assassinate the Emperor. She gave the girl poisoned tea and then requested that she deliver it to the Emperor to improve her image in his eyes. She also told her to drink it so that the poison may slowly affect her, and she may never be able to testify about her innocence when the matter is investigated. However, Uriah encountered Carl and gave him the tea, just as she was about to present it to the Emperor. Even though Madame Brenda never even imagined this, Carl ended up being the one accused of attempting to poison his own father. It's called karma. On the other side, Oscar informs Carl that he requires Vivian's power to heal Uriah, but he replies that it is impossible. Oscar becomes violent upon hearing this. But at that moment, the commander arrives and apprehends Carl. Even as Carl deals with him, he insists that Vivian's powers do not work on others. At that moment, a servant informs Oscar that Ray and Vivian are in the dungeon. He decides to meet the author and witness her powers firsthand. Additionally, he instructs the commander to allow Carl to remain in his office in the prison. Vivian is shocked to hear the story. Bruce informs her that ensuring everyone's happiness simply requires healing Uriah. However, Vivian explains that she is unable to do so as her powers do not work on others. He becomes angry at this because her powers changed him, and Vivian informs him that it was a mistake. However, Bruce says that if Vivian fails to cure Uriah, he will murder all of her loved ones, one by one. Just then, Oscar's servants arrive and escort Vivian to the palace. Meanwhile, Bruce fulfilled his deal with Ray and allowed Madame Brenda to escape to the Western Palace with Princess Lily. Ray informed Brenda that Carl will have learned the truth about his banishment by now and advised her to conceal her existence from the world. Meanwhile, Bruce is leading Vivian to the palace as he asks about her power. He lacks awareness, information about her need to write in a notebook for her powers to function, and she wishes to discover a method to distract Bruce in order to write something. Fortunately, the little monster steps in to help her out and attacks Bruce, causing him to lose his balance. Vivian sees this as a chance to flee, but the knights have already caught up with her. She whips out her notebook and starts writing in an effort to shrink herself. She is able to do that, flees the prison with the help of the baby monster, and runs to Carl. Bruce watches her writing in her book, and now he knows the secret to her power, so he wants the book as well. After Vivian and the baby monster come out of the prison, they are bewildered because they have no idea where Carl is. He is currently tied in Oscar's office, attempting to free himself by grabbing a paper knife from the table. However, in a surprising turn of events, a butler arrives at the scene, dismisses the guards, and warmly welcomes Carl, hinting at a past encounter. Carl realizes he must do something to escape, so he offers to accept Oscar's deal and states that he will ask Vivian to help them, but the assassin bursts into laughter on hearing this. He believes Carl is pitiful, and as he shares some details of their past confrontation, Carl realizes that he is the assassin who took his eye. He draws his sword to deal with him, stating that it is not worth fighting him if he can give away his lover so easily. He attempts to attack Carl, but he kicks the table at him and causes him to fall. Carl takes the paper knife in the same motion and frees himself. He then confidently informs the assassin that this weapon is sufficient to ensure his victory against someone of his caliber. Vivian is overjoyed to see Carl again, and they hug each other. They tell each other the gist of the things that happen, and after that, Vivian asks Carl to exit the palace right away. However, her plans come to a halt when the little monster instructs her to go to the portal door of the palace. She decides to follow him and tells Carl that she has no choice but to return to her world. She recalls that everything in this world will be destroyed if she doesn't take action, and she wants to save it. However, she doesn't want to lose her lover and asks Carl to join her in the real world to fix everything. Without hesitating, Carl accepts her invitation, stating that he will accompany her wherever she goes. Afterwards, the baby monster leads both of them to the grand library room. When the little monster uses its power and headbutts the wall, the door to the real world manifests in it. Our heroes are stunned, but they are both ready to walk through the door. Unfortunately, just as they were about to enter, Bruce shot an arrow that struck the baby monster, and the portal door was naturally shut. After the baby monster got injured, Bruce commands the guards to apprehend Carl, and Vivian insists that returning to her world is the only way to make things right here. Oscar also shows up at the library not long after that. He is filled with joy at the sight of Vivian, and he promises to give her anything she desires if she will heal Urea. Vivian is more concerned with healing the tiny monster's wounds so that she can use them to leave her world, and she tells Oscar the same. He would do everything for Urea, so he grants Vivian's request and told Bruce to contact the doctor. However, Bruce revealed his true nature as he stabbed him in the back while telling him that compassion was his weakness. To prevent Vivian and Carl from helping Oscar, the knights brandished their swords at Carl. At last, Bruce addressed Vivian and told her that he knew she had created this fantasy world. He hates her for making him change without even a reason, and he strangles her as she says it was a good thing for him to become younger. Bruce demands Vivian give him the notebook because he wants to write his destiny himself and become the Emperor. As Bruce announces his ambitions to become Emperor, everyone is caught off guard to buy time until her little monster is strong enough to open the portal. Vivian wanted to write something else, but Bruce stepped on her hand so that he could see what she was writing. He threatened to kill Carl if she didn't write what he wanted, and she realized she had no choice. Just then, out of nowhere, a knight charged Bruce from behind. Bruce evades the attack and then stabs the knight in the stomach before removing his helmet to reveal that he was actually Ray. He thrashes Ray, who has not lost all hope yet, and he acts as if he is furious with Vivian and says that she always denied Carl's request and was granting Bruce's request to be the Emperor instead. That was just his way of reminding her of what happened when she tried to fulfill Carl's first request, and she promptly recorded Bruce's wishes in her notebook. Ray's gamble proves right, and the glowing letters she wrote encircle Bruce's body, who at first believes his dream of becoming Emperor would come true. However, the truth soon became evident as the writing was too painful for Bruce to bear. He furiously lunged towards Vivian, but Carl swiftly parried the blow, and Bruce fell unconscious to the floor. The entrance to the real world reappears following that event, but just as Carl and Vivian are ready to step through the entrance, an earthquake shakes the castle because Vivian had completely used up her notebook. The situation becomes even more complicated when the palace walls start to crumble, causing debris to fall on Ray. Seeing Ray hit by the ruins devastates Carl, but he also feels the need to return to the real world because he is afraid the door might shut. As soon as Vivian sees that Carl is trapped in the rubble of the building, she rushes over to help him escape. However, he encourages her to hurry up and go for the door, saying that they can't afford to waste any time now. He kisses her hand and expresses his regret to Vivian for being unable to join her in the real world. He asks her to let him remember her even if they cannot meet again, and tears fall from Vivian's eyes as she promises to return shortly. She enters the portal and suddenly finds herself back in the real world, where she meets Gayan, the landlord's daughter. Vivian is taken aback by Gayan's words, since she spent months in the fictional world. But only a day has passed in the real world. She rushes to her room to finish revising her work, ensuring that everything in the Pharisee kingdom will be just as it had been previously. As soon as she does that, she runs out of the room and returns to the spot where the portal was. But by the time she arrives, it has disappeared. Tears flood her eyes as she vents her frustration at being unable to visit Carl in the fictional realm. She punches the wall, hoping a path can open up, but it is all in vain. Soon after that, she abruptly leaves her job without telling anyone her reasons and devotes herself to writing the next book with Carl as the protagonist. After a year, Vivian completes her most recent book, the third one in the Prince series. Carl becomes the Emperor and everyone is happy, but she doesn't know how to end the book. Suddenly, Gayan comes to Vivian and asks her about the ending of her novel. She shows her the latest chapter that was released about Carl choosing a woman from a foreign country to be his empress. Vivian is shocked because she never wrote that. But as she contacts her editor, he is adamant that she sent this chapter to him. She wants to check her revised work, so she hurries back to her apartment to grab her laptop, unaware of the light following her. As she reaches her room, she sees a shining golden puppy there. She wants to call 911 to get it out, but as she hears its voice, she realizes it is the little spirit who helped her. Before Vivian can realize anything, the little spirit teleports her back to the realm of the novel. Vivian finds herself in bed and wonders if she has just seen the little monster in a dream. However, as she sees herself dressed in a magnificent gown and then Daisy enters her room, Vivian realizes that she is back in the world of her novel. However, Daisy doesn't recognize her at all, and neither does Ray, even though Vivian is super happy to see them both again. After that, Ray escorts her to the banquet hall for a special event. Vivian asks her what is happening, and as she learns that it is the day for Carl's wedding, she feels devastated. She asks Ray who the bride is, and he tells her that she is already here, and that she will know her when she sees her. Vivian sees William and Minerva, as well as Oscar and Uriah with each other, and she is happy to see her protagonists again. Just then, a knight declares that the Emperor and his bride are about to enter the room. Vivian is bewildered because the story seems to have progressed without her will again. She wonders if Carl remembers her and ponders how she should ask him. The knight then announces everyone would make way for the bride, and shockingly enough, people start making way for her. Carl calls her from behind. She is surprised that he still remembers her because everyone seems to have forgotten her. However, that was just a big and elaborate prank. Everyone important to the story knows Vivian, and they are just acting like they have forgotten her to surprise her. After Carl teases her about being nervous because of his wedding, he tells her what happened. He tells her that he had completely forgotten about her once she departed from this world. However, he felt like there was a void in his heart that could never be fulfilled no matter what he did, and even after being the emperor, he felt sad. Then one day, the little monster who had become a pure spirit came before Carl with Vivian's notebook, which still contained a fragment of her power. As soon as Carl touched the notebook, the memories of Vivian flooded into his mind, and he was moved to tears. With that, he started working towards bringing her back. He went to the World Tree and from there to the real world, where he messed up with the ending of Vivian's novel and wrote about his marriage. He was hopeful that she would come after him after reading that, and somehow or another, his hopes came true. Vivian is overjoyed to hear this, but she is still worried that the world will collapse because she is here. However, Carl assures her that the Prince series is over, and now this story is about the witch named Vivian, who wrote the book. Carl finally kneels down before her and asks her if she would marry him. There is no reason for Vivian to say no to him, and she gladly takes his hand. They kiss, realizing that their lives are now blank pages, and they are the creators of their story now.
Love the manhwa? Subscribe for more. Your support makes it all possible. Hit subscribe now!